Is there a new Christmas special for The Chosen coming out? And if so, what is it gonna look like and when will it release? Well, recently I had an opportunity to interview Dallas Jenkins, the creator of The Chosen, and I asked him this exact question, as well as some other questions about his recent new movie, what's coming up in The Chosen, and more. Now, before I dive into that interview, let me take a quick moment to thank the sponsor for today's video, ArtzaBox. If you have ever wanted to feel close to the Holy Land but couldn't actually make the journey, ArtzaBox is an amazing way to do that. Each quarter, they release a new themed box that takes you through a different region or experience in Israel. They contain food, art, and other beautiful products that teach you about the culture and the land. And the best part is, all of these products come from local vendors in Israel, which, as you may know, have been devastated by the ongoing war in Israel and the drop in tourism. So this is an amazing way to support those being affected by this war. And in this month's box, there's a really beautiful item called an Ahava stone that is created by a couple who survived the Nova Festival attacks in Israel last year. And if you're not familiar with it, Ahava is the word in Hebrew for love. So purchasing one of these boxes not only helps you to connect with the Holy Land, it also blesses those who've been directly affected by the war. So if you'd like to purchase an ArtzaBox, you'll find a link below. And if you type in the promo code Brandon20, you'll get an extra 20% discount. Now, let's dive into our interview. So tonight we have got a really special guest. Dallas Jenkins, the creator of The Chosen, is joining us for our live stream. And so Dallas, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you.
Hey, long-time watcher, first-time guest. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh man, it's awesome. So we're going to talk about some really cool stuff with Dallas tonight. We're going to talk about some of his favorite Christmas traditions and what it's been like putting the Christmas stories on screen. But first, Dallas, you've had an exciting couple of months. Best Christmas Pageant Ever has released recently. And so how's that going? And what was it like to work on something non-Chosen related?
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's been surreal because I've been chasing this project for almost 20 years. I read the book that it's based on almost 20 years ago, fell in love with it, said, I have to make this movie. I pursued the rights every year, kept getting told no. I had prayer prompts on my calendar telling me to pray for it. I was just so desperate to tell this story because it's not only very funny and witty and has very classic Christmas feel to it, but unlike the majority of the great Christmas classics that we watch all the time, it puts a spotlight on the story of Jesus and what that means and what you should do as a response to that. And to see that that has been in theaters and gotten great reviews. I mean, the 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, including a good review from the New York Times. I certainly didn't expect that. The box office has been exceeded expectations for the studio. And so it's been really surreal because, as you know, Brandon, I've talked about this a lot. I don't measure myself by the numbers. I don't measure myself by the feedback. For me, the strong victory in this was that I got a chance to make the movie that I wanted to make. It really does put a spotlight on the message of Jesus, to get in theaters all over the country. It was a true victory. But the fact that it's getting the response that it has is a huge bonus, because it does mean that this movie will be impacting the pop culture conversation in the midst of all these other Christmas movies that come out every year.
Yeah, absolutely. And just excited to see this become a Christmas classic that people watch and they talk about year after year. So one of the things I would imagine would be kind of interesting for you is to go from a show like The Chosen, where you get to talk about Jesus so overtly and the gospel just gets to be front and center in every clip, to this where it's a little bit more subtle. And so how did that work out in that process of writing this? How did you kind of navigate that shift?
Yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't answer that the first time. I know you asked about the differences from coming from The Chosen to this. Yeah. Well, I will say this, as opposed to the pretty paintings and stained glass windows that we often see, the raw authenticity of what he came to do and who he was and why he did it is something that we sometimes get lost. And so in the process of telling the best Christmas pageant ever, you mentioned subtle. I think that's true to some extent because it's not actually the Jesus story like The Chosen is. But I don't think this story, even when I read the book and when I'm making the movie, is all that subtle in terms of this is about the true meaning of Christmas. And the true meaning of Christmas isn't just generosity. Now, generosity is an outcome, an outpouring of a true understanding of what Jesus did when he came as a child. And so the phrase, unto you a child is born, is the last phrase of the book. It's the last phrase of the movie. And what that really means, if you break it down, I'm sure you could do one of your Brandon Robbins style videos of, what does it actually mean? You've heard this, but it really means this. I mean, unto you, who is you? A child is born as opposed to a conquering king. That he was born and not just emerged as, coming down from the clouds as this big, like how many gods would do if they were real, is probably come out of the clouds and with a sword in their hand and announce themselves. He came as a humble servant. And a movie that really does explicitly put a spotlight on that in this, I think, is what makes this actually similar to The Chosen, even though the style and the approach are obviously much different.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And our family, just loved getting to see this and to have a Christmas movie that we get to share together that tells this story in this way and then puts it in the context of where we're living right now. And the characters are so relatable. It's just been beautiful to watch it and get to see other people enjoy it too. Now, speaking of Christmas, I thought we might do something a little fun while we've got some time together. So this interview, as I shared with you, is part of our special Christmas live stream that we're doing. And so one thing I know people might be interested to know is, do you have any special family traditions that you do at Christmas, things that you look forward to?
Absolutely. Every Christmas Eve, we watch It's a Wonderful Life, no exceptions. I cry every time, no exceptions. But wherever we're at, whether we're at my parents or my in-laws or happen to be home on Christmas Eve, we are watching It's a Wonderful Life. And we're going to curl up on the couch and we're going to eat things that we don't normally eat because we have forgiveness from God for ingesting a bunch of ice cream on his holiday.
Yeah.
And then we also read the best Christmas pageant ever. I mean, that book we read every year, and every year my wife and I have to pass it back and forth while we're crying. Hopefully, the movie, It's the best Christmas pageant ever, will start being part of that family tradition as well.
Yeah, that's great. All right, let me give you some rapid fire things just to hear what your favorite things are at Christmas and preferences and your thoughts. So how about this? Candy canes or Christmas cookies?
Christmas cookies.
All right. White lights or colored lights?
Well, regardless, I'm not hanging them. That's what I know.
Okay.
But I tend to like white lights a lot. I think when a neighborhood is kind of lit up with white lights, it's really pretty.
Nice. Tropical Christmas or snowy Christmas?
Snowy Christmas. Come on.
I know.
Anyone who prefers a tropical Christmas doesn't truly love Christmas.
That's a good point. All right. Real tree or fake tree?
Again, whether it's real or fake, I will not be the one to install it. I do love the smell of the real tree. I love the the fake tree, though, spares us from the awfulness of what do you call those? The leaves? Not the leaves, the pine needles.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever those are called, I'm blanking on it, being all over the floor. But yeah, either one, I'm either going to let my wife go ahead and install it, or we're going to find someone to do it for us.
Yeah, unless you've got one of those really old trees like we have, and it's dropping all the needles that are fake, and then you have those to clean up too.
Yeah, that's the worst of both worlds. I can't help you with that one.
Do you decorate your tree? Do you take part in that?
I may or may not occasionally toss something up there, but look, I'm one of those dads and husbands who just doesn't know how to do things. I'm a storyteller. I will tell the stories. And my wife has come to grips with the fact that she did not marry a handyman or anyone who notices much of interior decorating. So she gets to do it, and she actually loves it. So I'm happy to give her what she wants.
That's awesome. My wife as well. You can tell the story of how they put up the tree. That's it.
Exactly.
All right, eggnog or hot cocoa?
I'm an eggnog guy. I think Christmas, for some reason, I love it, and anytime else I don't really. But I'm going to go with eggnog.
Okay. Home Alone or Christmas Vacation?
Home Alone for sure. I mean, Christmas Vacation is lovely too, but it's almost, I don't know. The comedy is a little less my speed than Home Alone is. Home Alone's beautiful.
All right. Die Hard, Christmas movie or not?
It is a Christmas movie. I'm here to inform you. If there's been a debate, I'm going to settle it now. I have a little bit of history of doing things and saying things that are debatable, but this one is not debatable. Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Just because it happens to include, a terrorist attack on a building doesn't take away the when of it happening and what truly it takes over all of our hearts when we experience Christmas Eve. So yes, it is a Christmas movie.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dallas has spoken. It is done.
Yeah.
All right, I got one more for
Yes.
you. End of a Christmas Eve service, do you end with Silent Night or Joy to the World?
Silent Night. And that's why the movie also in the Christmas pageant ends with Silent Night. I think my Christmas special, The Messengers, which you've seen, ends with Joy to the World because we were going for this big, broad, exciting ending. And we had done Silent Night earlier, but I think the best Christmas Eve service gets you into a posture of beauty and Joy to the World's great too, but Silent Night, it's where it's at.
I'm with you there. My wife and I have debated this for years. So you've just settled whether or not our church is going to end with Silent Night or Joy to the World. So it's Silent Night.
Yeah. You're welcome to your parishioners.
There you go. All right. So you've done 2 Christmas specials with The Chosen. And so I'd love to know, what was it like trying to visualize the gospel in this way, to bring it to the screen? And maybe what was the hardest part of that?
Well, the hardest part, honestly, is finding that balance between, some of our traditions. I mean, this is what your channel's all about. In fact, you even did a video before my Christmas episodes came out talking about some of the things that we've gotten wrong or likely wrong in our understanding of like where it took place and whether it was a barn or a stable or someone's home. And so balancing I told you this too, I said, we made a couple of choices that are more traditional, even if they're not factual, because we think it captures capital T truth, which is we're trying to kind of combine some of the visuals we've had in our head that if I went too far away from those might kind of distract unnecessarily. So finding that balance between all of the different versions of this story. I'm not talking about the truth of the Gospels. I'm talking about some of the cultural context, the historical context that can be debated, trying to find that balance and really pull the curtain back on the story and try to give it to you as authentically as possible is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So a lot of people talked about how when we did The Messengers, which was the follow-up to The Shepherd, and we showed Joseph and Mary, cleaning up the stable and Joseph scooping up a pile of manure. Those are some of the things that I think are most important, whether that took place in a stable behind an inn or whether it took place as part of the lower level of the house. I don't think is quite as important as what we're saying about who Jesus is, and how he emerged into this world as a suffering servant.
Yeah. And so what is your research process like as you're like trying to figure those things out? I know you have a great team of people who give you the biblical background. So how do you go through that of figuring out, okay, what was maybe more historically accurate? This is what we're going to include. This is what we're going to change.
Yeah. So we of course start with scripture. And this is true of the Christmas projects we've done. And of course, every episode of The Chosen, we start with a scripture, a story that maybe we're passionate about telling and unpacking, something that connects to the main characters that we've positioned in this story. And then we work our way backwards and we go, okay, so what's a plausible backstory that will lead us to this point of life change for these characters that they don't really get into in scripture? And then what's some of the cultural context, historical context that, again, the gospel writers would have taken for granted in their readers because they were writing to a Jewish audience and at the time, and they don't get into some of the history that others might have known about already reading it. So we're going to give some of that, like a good pastor, like a good YouTuber. We'll give people the context of that they might not have otherwise known. So we look into what that is. A lot of that's internet. A lot of that's our biblical consultants. So Father David Guffey, the evangelical scholar Doug Huffman, and then Rabbi Jason Sobel, who's a Messianic Jewish rabbi who is a historian and a biblical historian. And so we start looking into some of that. We do some of our research, and then we start writing it and focusing on the humanity of it, making sure that just artistically and, media wise, it's a good piece of entertainment that you're actually going to enjoy watching and doesn't feel like a history lesson. And then we run it past our consultants again And then sometimes they'll point out certain things that we missed, and say, this would really give some additional weight to it. Would you consider putting this in there? And then our job is to put that in there into an artistically satisfying way that's entertaining to watch. So it's a long process. It's one we take very seriously, but one we also all recognize. And I think you've been great on your show to acknowledge this as well, that we are adding some artistic interpretation in a way that a pastor might do so, but we're adding to that artistically some imagination that we hope is plausible, that we hope God will, when we meet him in heaven, say, well done, good and faithful servant, and that you did capture the capital T truth, even though some of the facts we might not be fully have full knowledge of. And that's what we're going for.
Yeah, and I think it's such a difficult needle to thread that you all really thread so well. One of the comments, and I know you hear this about The Chosen, is people complain, it's not following the Bible, it's not doing that. But I think, what we have to kind of own up as people is sometimes we don't like the actual what's happening in the Bible if we really dig into it historically and culturally, because it doesn't fit our vision, kind of what you and I talked about how we love it, when they're going from door to door and there's no room at the end, because that's what we've always been told, even if that's not in the Bible. But then what I love about what you've done in the show so much is there's so many things that are biblically accurate in the sense of, like, this is what the world would have been like. This is the context that they would have been walking into. This is how people would have interacted. And it pulls us into that biblical picture in this amazing way that now we connect with the story differently. And we're seeing it from a perspective we've never seen before. It's not just words on a page. It's now something visual on the screen that we truly connect with. And I think that's why you're seeing the show broadly just change people's lives, because it's changing the way they see the Bible.
Yeah, and I think because we help establish authenticity within the historical, cultural, and yes, human context. Because even if for example, if we take Simon before he met Jesus, we don't know much of anything about that in the Gospels. But if we can give you a plausible backstory, one that doesn't contradict what history and culture teaches us about their lives at that time, people can truly identify with these people and see Jesus through their eyes. And if we can get you to identify with their questions and struggles and doubts, which we know they would have had, and if we can get you to believe the authenticity of the cultural context, that it looks and feels like first century Israel, and this looks and feels like an authentic portrayal of humanity and of geography and of culture, then maybe we're open to believing the truth of what Jesus was here to teach and what he was here to give. And so that's why we see 30 to 40% of our viewership is non-believers. At least half, if not the majority of our cast and crew, non-believers. They don't necessarily believe in the conclusion of the story, which is that Jesus is the Son of God. However, they are portraying authentically the truth of this story. And hopefully, maybe, the openness the world will have, because they've identified with the storytelling, that the truth, that the historical context can bring you into the biblical context, and hopefully God can reveal himself, which he has for literally millions of people so far around the world.
Yeah, and just think about how amazing it would be if 30 to 40% of our congregations on Sunday morning were made up of non-believers who were coming and were intrigued and wanted to hear the word, even if they didn't believe yet. Like, just how amazing that would be. I mean, that's just what a testament.
And it just reminded me, not to try to bring it back to Best Christmas Pageant Ever, but this movie that I did, there's a line in the book that I put in the movie where the outsider is the girl, the tough girl, the bully, who's visiting church for the very first time and trying to make sense of all of it. And she sees a food drive, and she sees Jesus in a painting on the wall, and she sees they're singing hymns, and they're telling Jesus stories. And she says, "What's this pageant you're talking about?" She goes, the other girl says, "It's a play." She says, "What's it about?" And she says, "It's about Jesus." And Imogene sighs and goes, "Everything here is." And I'm like, is there a greater thing, Brandon, that you could hear as a pastor, that when people see your church, everything's about Jesus?
Exactly.
I mean, that's what moved me initially about this story. And I think that's what I hope people take away from the movie, take away from The Chosen. Is that, yes, there's stories and cultural context and historical context and artistic imagination, but it's ultimately about Jesus.
Absolutely. Definitely. So there's one glaring part of the traditional Christmas story that we've never seen from The Chosen, and that's the story of the Magi. Do you think we're ever going to see a chosen version of this?
That's a really good question, Brandon.
That's okay. That's a good answer.
Yeah. Yeah, if you were waiting more than that, if that pause felt awkward, well, that's because I don't have much more to say just yet. So all I can say is that's a really good question.
Yeah. Okay.
I would love to see it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would. Can I ask you if you were hypothetically ever to do it, what do you think would be one of the most fun parts about trying to bring that story to the screen? So the story of the Magi.
Yeah, any story that we choose to tell in The Chosen from Scripture, we're always going to want to do it in a way that isn't normally done. And we call it the chosen way, which is we're going to find the humanity. We're going to find the context. And so if we were to ever tell the story of the Magi, we would certainly want to help you, the viewer, see who these men were, why they were doing what they were doing, and what some of the context of it is really, really fascinating. So I hope that someday we get a chance to not only explore that ourselves, but bring it to the world.
Absolutely. So you know what I'll be waiting for. Are there 3 Magi? Are there a whole bunch of Magi? What are we doing? I'm not going to make you answer that, but I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, I hope that your curiosity is answered at some point in the future. We'll see.
Awesome. So, will there be a new Chosen Christmas special? Well, here's my take. In Dallas's answer, I get the sense that, yeah, there is something they're working on. He didn't confirm it, but he also didn't deny it. And it would only make sense for them to complete the Christmas narrative with a story of the Magi. Now, there's no data on when this will release, but based on his response, my hunch is that it's going to be sooner than we think. So, there you have it. Not a clear answer, but a strong hint. So, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see another video on The Chosen, just click this link right here. And if you haven't already done so, make sure to check out our sponsor for today's video, ArtzaBox. And don't forget to use that special promo code that we've got, Brandon20, that's going to get you an extra 20% off. You'll find the link down in the description. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.